The little girl's voice was barely a whisper, but it shattered the silence of that ordinary afternoon like glass breaking on marble. Her tiny fingers clutched her father's worn sleeve as she stared across the park, her eyes fixed on a stranger glowing in the soft daylight. Her lips trembled before she spoke again, softer this time, as if afraid the world might hear her fragile wish. "Dad. I want her as my mom. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Kindness Verse. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them." Armin had heard many things in his life, but nothing had ever pierced him the way those words did. He froze where he stood, the cheap plastic bag of groceries hanging from his hand, suddenly feeling heavier than it ever had. He followed his daughter Meher's gaze and saw her, a woman sitting on a park bench under the shade of a blooming gulmohar tree. She was reading a book, sunlight dancing across her face, her expression calm and distant, like someone untouched by the chaos of the world. For a moment, Armin forgot how to breathe. Life had not been kind to him. Ever since his wife, Sana, had passed away 3 years ago after a sudden illness, the world had turned into a relentless storm. Armin had been left alone with a 2-year-old daughter and a heart full of grief he never had the luxury to process. He worked long hours as a delivery rider, navigating the scorching heat and unpredictable traffic, all just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Nights were the hardest. Meher would ask questions he didn't know how to answer, about where her mother had gone and why she never came back. He would hold her close, whispering stories that broke his own heart as he told them. Meher had grown up too quickly in a world that had given her too little. She learned to stay quiet when her father was tired, to smile even when she didn't fully understand why her chest felt heavy. But she never stopped longing. Not for toys or sweets, but for something deeper, something she couldn't quite name until that day in the park. Armin shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. He wanted to brush it off, to distract her, to pretend he hadn't heard. But there was something in her voice, something so raw and honest, that he couldn't ignore it. He knelt beside her, his tired eyes searching her face, and saw something that terrified him. Hope. The woman on the bench was named Elara. She had come to the park that afternoon to escape her own tangled life. After years of chasing a career that had left her empty, she had recently returned to the city, hoping to find a sense of purpose she had long lost. She often came to that same bench, watching the world move around her while she tried to figure out where she belonged in it. That day, she noticed the little girl staring at her. There was something about Meher's gaze that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't curiosity or shyness. It was something deeper, something that made Elara lower her book and meet the child's eyes. And in that brief moment, something shifted inside her. Days passed, and life returned to its usual rhythm. But Meher didn't forget. Every afternoon, she would tug at Armin's hand, asking to go back to the park. At first, he resisted, his heart uneasy with the idea. But eventually, worn down by her persistence, he gave in. And every day, Elara was there. At first, it was just glances. Then small smiles. Then one day, Meher, with the fearless innocence only a child can have, walked up to her and handed her a small, crumpled flower she had picked from the ground. Armin watched from a distance, his heart pounding, unsure of what would happen next. Elara accepted the flower, her eyes softening in a way she hadn't felt in years. That was the beginning. Slowly, conversations started. At first, they were simple and cautious. Elara learned about Meher's love for drawing and her habit of naming stray cats. She learned about Armin's long days and his quiet strength. And Armin, in turn, began to see Elara not as a stranger, but as someone who carried her own silent battles. There was a warmth in her presence that filled a space he hadn't realized was still empty. But life, as always, wasn't simple. Armin struggled with guilt. Every time Meher laughed with Elara, a part of him felt relief, but another part felt like he was betraying Sana's memory. He questioned himself constantly, wondering if he was allowed to feel this way, if he was allowed to let someone new into their lives. Elara had her own fears. She had built walls around her heart for so long that the idea of stepping into someone else's life, especially one so fragile, terrified her. She knew the weight of what Meher wanted, even if the child didn't fully understand it. And yet, despite all the doubts, something kept pulling them together. One afternoon, as the golden light of the setting sun painted the park in warm hues, Meher sat between them, her small hands holding theirs. She looked up at Armin, then at Elara, and smiled in a way that seemed far too wise for her age. In that moment, Armin felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just happiness, but peace. Time passed, and the bond grew stronger. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, but steady and real. Elara became a part of their daily life, not as a replacement for what was lost, but as something new, something different. And one day, Armin realized that love didn't erase the past. It didn't replace it. It simply made room for more. As the story comes close to its end, if this journey has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share. Your support means more than you know, and it helps keep stories like this alive. The day Armin finally found the courage to speak, the park looked just as it had the first time Meher had pointed at Elara. The same trees, the same bench, the same soft sunlight. But everything had changed. He looked at Elara, his voice unsteady but sincere, and told her that he didn't have much to offer. Just a small home, a busy life, and a little girl with a big heart. But he also told her that if she was willing, they could build something together. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Elara didn't answer immediately. She looked at Meher, who was watching them with hopeful eyes, and then back at Armin. And she smiled. Before we reach the final moment, take a second to comment where you're watching from and share one kind thing you've done or received. Let's spread kindness together. Years later, Meher would barely remember the exact words she had whispered that day. But she would always remember the feeling. The moment her world had shifted, when a simple wish had found its way into reality. And Armin, standing in that same park, watching his daughter laugh as she ran toward Elara, would realize that sometimes, life doesn't give you what you had planned. Sometimes, it gives you something unexpected. Something beautiful. Something worth every struggle.